the first time Garrett Grayson saw Katherine Foster. She was standing in the doorway of the general store in Golden, Colorado, watching a child blow out birthday candles through the window with an expression so detached it made his chest tighten. It was the spring of 1878, and he had come down from his mountain cabin for supplies, his long dark hair tied back with a leather cord, his muscled frame drawing attention from most folks who passed by, though he paid them no mind. He had noticed her immediately, not because she was beautiful, though she was, with hair the color of autumn wheat and eyes like stormy skies, but because of that look on her face like she was witnessing something from another world entirely, something that had nothing to do with her and never would. He loaded his supplies onto his pack mule and found himself glancing back at her more than once. She wore a simple gray dress that had seen better days, and her hands were red and rough from work. When the family inside the store began singing, she turned away abruptly and walked down the street with her head down, disappearing into the boarding house at the far end of town. Garrett had learned over his 30 years to trust his instincts, and something about that woman pulled at him in a way he could not explain. He finished securing his goods and made a decision that surprised even himself. Instead of heading back up the mountain as planned, he walked into the Silver Pine Saloon and asked the barkeeper about her. "Miss Foster." The man wiped down the bar with a rag that had seen cleaner days. "She works at the boarding house, cooking, cleaning, whatever needs doing. Keeps to herself mostly. Been here about 6 months, maybe 7. Came in on the stage one day with nothing but a carpet bag and asked for work." Garrett ordered a whiskey and drank it slowly, thinking. He had been alone on his mountain for 5 years now, ever since he had decided that civilization held nothing for him but disappointment and noise. He trapped, hunted, and sold pelts and meat in town when he needed money for things he could not make himself. It was a solitary life, but it had suited him just fine. Until now, apparently. He found himself walking toward the boarding house as the afternoon sun began its descent behind the mountains. The place was run by a woman named Mrs. Henley, a widow who had a sharp tongue but a decent heart. He knocked on the door, and when she opened it, her eyebrows rose nearly to her hairline. "Garrett Grayson. I have not seen you in town for more than an hour in 3 years. What brings you to my door?" "I am looking for a cook," he said, the lie coming surprisingly easy. "Heard you might have someone who would be interested in temporary work." Mrs. Henley's expression turned shrewd. "You have never needed a cook before." "I have never had a broken arm before either," he said, flexing his perfectly healthy right arm slightly and wincing for effect. "Hunting accident last week. Cannot manage everything on my own right now." It was a bold lie, one that could easily be disproven, but Mrs. Henley seemed to consider it. "How long would this work be for?" "Month, maybe 2, until I am healed proper." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Katherine might be interested. She could use the money. But I will warn you, Mr. Grayson, she is under my protection. You treat her with respect, or you will answer to me and every decent person in this town. You have my word, Mrs." Henley called for Katherine, and a few minutes later, the woman from the store appeared in the hallway, wiping her hands on her apron. Up close, Garrett could see the fine lines around her eyes, the weariness that seemed to emanate from her very bones. She looked at him with polite disinterest, waiting. "Miss Foster, this is Garrett Grayson. He lives up in the mountains and is in need of a cook for a month or so while he recovers from an injury. The pay would be $2 a week plus room and board. Are you interested?" Katherine's eyes flicked to Garrett, assessing him quickly before returning to Mrs. Henley. "What kind of injury?" "Broken arm," Mrs. Henley said before Garrett could respond. "Hunting accident." "Which arm?" Garrett raised his right arm slightly. "This one." makes it difficult to do much of anything. Katherine looked at his arm, then at his face, and for a moment he thought she could see right through the lie, but she just nodded slowly. I can cook. I can clean. I am not afraid of hard work. The mountain is isolated, Garrett said, feeling like he should be honest about at least that much. No neighbors for miles, just me and the wilderness. Some women find it unsettling. I am not most women, Katherine said, and there was something in her voice, a flatness that suggested she had seen things that made an isolated mountain seem like paradise. When can you start? He asked. Tomorrow morning. I will need to pack my things. And that was how, less than 24 hours after first seeing her, Garrett found himself helping Katherine onto his horse while her single carpet bag was secured to the mule. She sat stiffly in front of him, her back ramrod straight, careful not to lean against him even though the trail was rough. He could smell the lye soap she had used on her hair, and the faint scent of bread dough on her dress. The ride up the mountain took 3 hours, winding through pine forests and across streams still swollen with snowmelt. Garrett's cabin sat in a clearing with a view of the valley below, a solid structure he had built himself from logs and determination. It had 2 rooms, a main living area with a kitchen and fireplace, and a smaller bedroom. There was also a small loft above, accessible by a ladder where he normally slept. You will take the bedroom, he said as they dismounted. I will sleep in the loft. Katherine looked at the cabin, her expression unreadable. It is nicer than I expected. What did you expect? A cave, perhaps, with animal skins on the walls. Was that humor in her voice? Garrett could not quite tell, but it made him smile regardless. I have some standards, Miss Foster. Katherine, she said quietly. If we are to live in the same house for a month, you might as well call me Katherine. Then you should call me Garrett. She nodded but did not say his name, and he found himself wanting to hear it from her lips with an intensity that surprised him. He showed her around the cabin, pointing out where he kept supplies, how the stove worked, where the well was. She listened carefully, asking practical questions, and he realized she was good at this, at adapting, at making do. She unpacked her carpet bag in the bedroom, which did not take long as she seemed to own almost nothing, and then set about making supper with the supplies he had just brought from town. As she worked, Garrett sat at the table, pretending to struggle with his injured arm while sharpening a knife with his left hand. He watched her move around the kitchen with efficient grace, her movements economical and practiced. She did not hum or sing as she cooked. She did not make small talk. She simply worked, and when she placed a plate of beans, cornbread, and fried venison in front of him, the food was good, better than anything he had made for himself in years. This is excellent, he said honestly. Thank you. They ate in silence, and afterward, Katherine cleaned the dishes while Garrett brought in firewood, forgetting to favor his supposedly injured arm until he caught her watching him. He made a show of wincing and switching the logs to his left arm, and she looked away quickly, but not before he saw something flicker across her face. Amusement, perhaps, or maybe suspicion. That night, as he lay in the loft listening to the sound of her moving around in the bedroom below, Garrett wondered what he had gotten himself into. He had lied to bring her here, had fabricated an injury just to spend time with a woman he did not even know. It was foolish and impulsive, and he could not quite bring himself to regret it. The next morning he woke to the smell of coffee and frying bacon. Katherine was already up, dressed in the same gray dress, her hair pulled back in a neat bun. She handed him a cup of coffee without a word, and he took it gratefully, savoring the bitter warmth. What would you like me to do today? She asked. Besides cooking, I mean, Garrett thought quickly. The cabin could use a good cleaning, and there are some clothes that need mending. My sewing is not the best even with 2 good hands. She nodded and set to work after breakfast. Garrett went outside, supposedly to check his traps but really just to give her space and to think. He had brought her here under false pretenses, and he knew he would have to come clean eventually. But not yet. Not until he understood why she had looked so lost watching that child blow out birthday candles. Not until he figured out what had put that emptiness in her eyes. Over the next few days, they fell into a routine. Katherine cooked and cleaned and mended. Garrett did his usual work, hunting and trapping, always careful to remember his injured arm when she was watching. In the evenings, they ate together, and slowly, very slowly, she began to talk. It started with small things. Comments about the weather, observations about the wildlife she saw from the window. Garrett responded carefully, not pushing, just accepting whatever she chose to share, and gradually she shared more. "I grew up in Ohio," she said one evening as they sat by the fire after supper. "On a farm. It was a hard life, but it was home." "Do you miss it?" She was quiet for a long moment. "I miss the idea of it more than the reality." "What brought you to Colorado?" Restlessness. The need to be somewhere else, anywhere else. He understood that. He had come to the mountains for similar reasons, fleeing something he could not quite name but felt deep in his bones. "Do you like it here? In the cabin, I mean." "It is peaceful," she said, and there was something in her voice, a softness he had not heard before. "I like the quiet." On the 5th day, Garrett decided to test the waters. He had snared several rabbits and decided to make an occasion of it, even though there was no particular reason to celebrate. While Katherine was washing clothes at the stream behind the cabin, he prepared a surprise. He cleaned the rabbits and set them to roast with wild onions and herbs he had gathered. He found a bottle of elderberry wine he had traded for the previous year and had been saving for no particular reason. And he picked wildflowers from the meadow, awkwardly arranging them in a tin cup on the table. When Katherine came back inside, her arms full of wet laundry, she stopped short at the sight of the table. "What is this?" "Dinner," Garrett said simply. "Thought we could make it special tonight." "Why? Does there need to be a reason?" She stared at the flowers, her expression unreadable. "People do not do things like this without a reason." "Then the reason is that I wanted to," he said, pulling out a chair for her. "Please, sit." She hesitated, then slowly set down the laundry and took the seat. Garrett poured wine into 2 cups and sat across from her. The rabbit was perfectly cooked, the meat falling off the bone, and he watched as she took a small bite, her eyes widening slightly. "This is good. You made this with one arm." He had forgotten his lie for a moment. "I managed." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and he saw the suspicion clearly now. But she did not call him out. Instead, she asked, "Why did you really bring me here, Garrett?" His name from her lips sent a thrill through him that he tried to hide. "I told you, I needed a cook. Your arm is not broken." "No," he admitted. "It is not." "So why?" He met her eyes, those stormy gray eyes that held so much hidden pain. "I saw you in town, watching that child's birthday through the window. You looked so alone, and I thought maybe you could use a place to be where no one expected anything from you except to just be." Katherine set down her fork carefully. "That is either the kindest thing anyone has ever done for me or the most manipulative. I have not decided which. I hope you will decide it is the former." "Why do you care? You do not even know me." "No," Garrett agreed, "but I would like to." She was quiet for a long time, looking at the flowers, at the wine, at the meal he had prepared. Then she picked up her cup and took a sip. "I have not celebrated anything in 11 years. Not birthdays, not holidays, nothing." "Why not?" "Because celebrating things means hoping for things, and hope is dangerous. It makes you vulnerable. It makes you believe that good things can happen, and when they do not, when they are taken away, the disappointment is crushing." Garrett leaned forward slightly. What was taken away from you, Katherine? She shook her head. That is a story for another time, maybe, if I decide to tell it. He nodded, not pushing. That is fair, but I want you to know something. While you are here, I am going to find reasons to celebrate. Small things, meaningless things, just because they are there. And you can participate or not, but I am going to keep doing it. Why? Because you deserve to remember what it feels like, to feel special, to feel like you matter. Her eyes filled with tears that she blinked away quickly, her jaw tightening. You do not know what you are talking about. Maybe not, but I am going to try anyway. They finished dinner in silence, but it was a different kind of silence than before. Something had shifted between them, a crack in the wall she had built around herself. And Garrett intended to widen that crack, gently, patiently, one small celebration at a time. The next morning, he woke her with coffee and a single wildflower laid across the cup's saucer. "Good morning," he said cheerfully. "I am celebrating the fact that I saw an eagle this morning. Beautiful bird, wanted to share the joy of it." Katherine looked at the flower, then at him. "You are serious about this?" "Completely." She took the flower carefully, twirling it between her fingers. "It is just a flower. It is a flower that made me think of you. That makes it more than just a flower." Over the following days, Garrett found excuses to celebrate everything. A perfect sunny day, the first ripe berries of the season, successfully tracking a deer. The way the sunset painted the mountains gold. Each time he did something small. Left her a smooth stone he found by the stream, made her favorite meal, picked more flowers, carved her a small wooden bird from a piece of pine. At first, Katherine accepted these gestures with confusion and suspicion. But gradually, he saw her beginning to soften. She would smile just slightly when she found his small gifts. She started pointing out things she noticed too. A family of quail crossing the clearing. The way the moonlight looked on the snow-capped peaks. 2 weeks into her stay, Garrett decided to take a bigger risk. He saddled his horse and asked her if she wanted to go for a ride. "There is a place I want to show you. A meadow about an hour from here. The wildflowers should be in full bloom." "I am not sure that is appropriate," Katherine said, but he could tell she wanted to go. "I promise I will be a perfect gentleman. We will be back before dark." She hesitated, then nodded. "All right." They rode together, Katherine sitting in front of him again, but this time she was more relaxed, allowing herself to lean back slightly against his chest. Garrett savored the contact, the warmth of her, the way she fit against him like she was meant to be there. His arm around her waist kept her steady on the horse, and he could feel her heartbeat, quick and light. The meadow was exactly as he remembered, a sea of color stretching out in every direction. Purple lupines, yellow alpine sunflowers, pink shooting stars, and white columbines painted the landscape like something from a dream. Katherine gasped when she saw it, a sound of pure, unguarded wonder. "It is beautiful," she whispered. "I found it 3 years ago," Garrett said, dismounting and helping her down. "Come here every summer. Seemed like something worth celebrating." They walked through the flowers, Katherine trailing her fingers over the blooms, and for the first time since he had met her, she looked genuinely happy. Not just content or calm, but truly joyful. Her face lit up in a way that took his breath away, and he realized with startling clarity that he was falling in love with her. It was not something he had planned or even wanted, necessarily. Love was complicated and messy and required vulnerability he had spent years avoiding. But watching her spin slowly in the meadow, her arms outstretched, her face turned toward the sun, he knew it was too late. He was in love with Katherine Foster, this woman who had forgotten how to celebrate, and he wanted nothing more than to spend the rest of his life giving her reasons to smile. "Thank you for bringing me here," she said, coming to stand beside him. I cannot remember the last time I felt this happy. You should feel this happy every day. Life does not work that way. It could. She looked up at him, and he saw something in her eyes he had not seen before, a tentative hope, fragile as spun glass. You really believe that, do not you, that life can be good? I believe that life is what we make of it. And I believe that everyone deserves moments of joy, especially people who have been denied them for too long. Katherine reached out and took his hand, her fingers small and rough against his calloused palm. I am afraid, she admitted. Afraid to hope. Afraid to feel anything, because when I do, it hurts so much when it is taken away. What was taken away from you? He asked gently. You do not have to tell me, but I want to understand. She was quiet for so long he thought she would not answer. Then, softly, she began to speak. I was married once. His name was Daniel. We met when I was 18, married 6 months later. He was kind and good, and we were happy. We had a daughter, Emma. She was born the day after my 20th birthday, and she was perfect, beautiful and healthy and full of life. Garrett waited, his heart heavy with the knowledge of where this story was going. When Emma was 2, there was a fever that went through our town. Daniel got sick first. He died within 3 days. Emma got sick the day after we buried him. She lasted a week, fighting so hard, but in the end, it was not enough. I buried my whole family within 2 weeks, and after that, I stopped celebrating anything. I stopped marking birthdays or holidays or any kind of special occasion, because all they did was remind me of what I had lost. Tears streamed down her face now, and Garrett pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly against his chest. I am so sorry, Katherine. I am so sorry. She cried into his shirt, great heaving sobs that seemed to come from the depths of her soul, and he held her through all of it, stroking her hair and murmuring comfort. When she finally quieted, she pulled back slightly, wiping at her face. That was 11 years ago, she said. I was 22 when they died. I am 33 now, and I still have not figured out how to live in a world without them. There is no right way to grieve, Garrett said. No timeline for healing. But Katherine, closing yourself off from joy is not the answer. Your husband and daughter would not want that for you. How do you know what they would want? Because anyone who loved you would want you to be happy. They would want you to live, not just exist. She looked up at him, her eyes red and swollen but somehow lighter, as if sharing her story had lifted some of the weight she had been carrying. Is that what I have been doing? Just existing? I think so, but it does not have to be that way anymore. She touched his face then, her palm against his bearded cheek, and he leaned into the touch, his eyes closing briefly. You are a good man, Garrett Grayson, better than you probably realize. I just want to see you smile, he said honestly. I want to see you live again. I think I am beginning to want that too. They stayed in the meadow until the sun began to set, talking about everything and nothing. Katherine told him about her childhood in Ohio, about her parents who had died when she was young, about the farm that had been sold after their deaths. Garrett told her about growing up in Missouri, about working in logging camps and as a ranch hand before deciding he needed solitude more than society. They shared stories and dreams and fears, and with every word, the connection between them deepened. On the ride back to the cabin, Katherine leaned fully against him, her body relaxed and trusting in his arms. Garrett rested his chin on the top of her head and thought about how right this felt, how much he wanted it to last forever. That night after dinner, Katherine did something that surprised him. She asked if he would teach her to dance. There was a fiddle player at the boarding house sometimes, she explained. People would dance and I would watch from the kitchen. I always wanted to learn, but I never had anyone to teach me. Garrett was not much of a dancer, but he knew enough. He hummed a waltz he remembered from a barn dance years ago and took her hands, pulling her close. They moved awkwardly at first, Katherine stepping on his feet more than once, but gradually they found a rhythm. He held her waist, and she rested her hand on his shoulder, and they swayed together in the firelight, creating their own music, their own celebration. "This is nice," Katherine said softly, her head resting against his chest so she could hear his heartbeat. "I did not realize how much I missed human touch, how much I missed connection." "You do not have to miss it anymore," Garrett said, his voice rough with emotion. "I am right here." She looked up at him then, her face inches from his, and he saw the question in her eyes. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he lowered his head and kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative, but when she kissed him back, her arms wrapping around his neck, it deepened into something more. A promise. A beginning. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Katherine smiled at him with wonder. "I did not think I would ever feel this way again. That I could feel this way again." "What way?" "Alive. Full of possibility, like maybe the future holds good things after all." "It does," Garrett assured her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I promise you it does." They stood there, holding each other, and Garrett felt something shift in his chest, like a locked door finally swinging open. He had been alone for so long, convinced that solitude was safer than connection, but Katherine had shown him what he had been missing, what he had been running from. The next morning, Garrett woke early and made breakfast for Katherine, reversing their usual roles. When she emerged from the bedroom, still sleepy-eyed and rumpled, he presented her with eggs and bacon and fresh bread he had baked while she slept. "What is the occasion?" she asked, but she was smiling now, getting used to his constant celebrations. "I am celebrating the fact that you are here, that I get to see you every morning, that you kissed me last night and did not regret it." "Who said I did not regret it?" she teased, and he loved this side of her, playful and light. "Did you?" "No," she admitted. "Not even a little bit." "Good, because I plan on doing it again, often." She laughed, a sound like music, and Garrett thought he would do anything to hear that laugh every day for the rest of his life. Over the next week, their relationship deepened. They spent their days working together, Garrett teaching Katherine how to fish and track animals, Katherine teaching him how to make bread that did not turn out like rocks. They talked constantly, sharing their histories, their hopes, their fears. And every evening they found reasons to celebrate. The first star of the evening, a particularly good batch of stew, the way the wind sounded in the pines. Garrett continued his tradition of small gifts and gestures. He woke her with flowers. He carved her initials into a tree near the cabin. He made her a necklace from a piece of polished turquoise he had been saving. Each gift was received with growing joy, as if Katherine was rediscovering a part of herself she had thought lost forever. One morning, 3 weeks into her stay, Katherine woke to find the cabin empty. She called for Garrett but received no answer. Confused and a little worried, she stepped outside and found him standing in the clearing, looking at something on the ground. "Garrett, is everything all right?" He turned to her with a grin that made her heart skip. "Come here. I want to show you something." She walked over and looked down. He had arranged stones in the clearing to spell out words. "I celebrate you today." "Why?" she asked, though she was smiling so wide her cheeks hurt. "Because you have been here for 3 weeks, and you have made every single day better than the one before. Because you are starting to laugh again. Because you are the bravest person I know. Because I am falling in love with you, and that is worth celebrating more than anything." Katherine felt her breath catch. "You are falling in love with me?" "I think I started falling the moment I saw you standing outside that general store, looking so lost. And every day since, I have fallen a little more. So yes, Katherine Foster, I am in love with you. Deeply, completely, and without reservation." She stared at him, her eyes filling with tears again, but these were different from the ones she had cried in the meadow. These were tears of happiness, of relief, of something that felt dangerously close to hope. "I am scared," she whispered. "I know. I am scared that if I love you, I will lose you. That is how it works for me. I love people and they leave." "Look at me," Garrett said, taking her hands in his. His grip was strong, his hands calloused and warm, and she felt anchored by his touch. "I am not going anywhere. I am here, and I am choosing to be here every single day, with you." "How can you promise that? Life is uncertain, people die, bad things happen." "You are right," he agreed. "I cannot promise that nothing bad will ever happen, but I can promise that whatever happens, we will face it together. And I can promise that every single day I have with you, I will make sure you know how much you matter, how special you are, how loved you are." Katherine looked into his eyes, those steady, honest eyes that had never lied to her except about his supposedly broken arm, and she made a decision. She could keep hiding from life, keep protecting herself from potential pain, or she could take a chance. She could choose love, even knowing it was risky, even knowing she might get hurt again. "I love you too," she said, her voice stronger now. "I did not want to. I tried not to. But I love you, Garrett Grayson. I love your kindness and your patience and the way you find reasons to celebrate the smallest things. I love how safe I feel with you, how seen." He pulled her into his arms and kissed her with a passion that made her dizzy. When they finally broke apart, he pressed his forehead against hers. "Marry me, Katherine. Stay here with me. Let me spend the rest of my life giving you reasons to celebrate." "That was fast," she said, but she was smiling through her tears. "When you know, you know. And I know that you are what I have been looking for all these years alone on this mountain. You are my home, Katherine. Say yes." She thought about her life before, the empty years of just going through the motions. She thought about Daniel and Emma, and while the thought of them still hurt, she realized that the pain was different now, softer somehow, and she knew deep in her bones that they would want this for her. They would want her to love again, to live again. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." Garrett let out a whoop of joy that sent birds scattering from the nearby trees and lifted her off her feet, spinning her around until they were both dizzy and laughing. When he set her down, he kissed her again, and Katherine felt something she had not felt in 11 years. Pure, uncomplicated happiness. They rode to Golden the next day to speak with the preacher. Mrs. Henley cried when she heard the news and insisted on making Katherine a proper wedding dress. "You came to me with nothing," she said, hugging Katherine tightly, "but you are leaving with everything. I am so happy for you, dear girl." The wedding took place a week later in the small church in Golden. It was a simple affair with Mrs. Henley and a few townspeople in attendance. Katherine wore a dress of cream-colored cotton with lace at the collar, and Garrett wore his best shirt and a new vest he had purchased for the occasion. His hair was freshly washed and tied back, and he looked so handsome that Katherine could hardly breathe. When the preacher asked if she took this man as her husband, Katherine said, "I do," with a conviction that surprised her. When Garrett slipped a simple gold band on her finger, a ring he had commissioned from the local jeweler, she felt tears streaming down her face. "I celebrate this moment," Garrett whispered to her after they were pronounced husband and wife. "And every moment after." They had a small celebration at the boarding house, with cake that Mrs. Henley had baked and elderberry wine. People congratulated them and wished them well, and for the first time in over a decade, Katherine allowed herself to feel the full weight of joy, to embrace it without fear, to believe that maybe, just maybe, she deserved this. They rode back to the mountain that evening, to the cabin that was now truly their home. Garrett carried her over the threshold, a tradition he insisted on even though she laughed and protested that it was foolish. Inside, he had filled the room with wildflowers, candles burning on every surface, creating a warm, golden glow. "You did all this today?" Katherine asked, touched beyond words. "I wanted our first night as husband and wife to be special, to be memorable." "It already is," she said, wrapping her arms around his neck. "You already are." They made love for the first time that night, a slow, tender joining that left them both breathless and amazed. Garrett was gentle with her, patient, making sure she felt cherished and safe. And Katherine, who had not been touched intimately in 11 years, discovered that her body remembered how to respond, how to feel pleasure, how to give and receive love. Afterward, lying in his arms with her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, Katherine felt a peace she had never expected to feel again. "I never thought I would be this happy," she admitted. "I thought that part of my life was over." "It is just beginning," Garrett said, kissing the top of her head. "We have so much ahead of us, Katherine, so many reasons to celebrate." The summer passed in a haze of happiness. Garrett continued his tradition of finding reasons to celebrate, and now Katherine joined in, pointing out moments that deserved recognition. The first tomatoes from the small garden she planted, a successful hunt, the way the cabin looked in the morning light. They celebrated everything, the meaningful and the mundane, and in doing so, they built a life filled with intention and joy. Katherine proved to be an excellent partner in every way. She learned to help with the trapping and hunting, her aim with a rifle improving steadily under Garrett's patient instruction. She preserved food for the coming winter, made soap and candles, and turned the cabin into a true home with small touches that spoke of care and permanence. Garrett, in turn, became more social, making trips to town more frequently, sometimes with Katherine, sometimes alone to trade or gather supplies. He built her a rocking chair for the porch, where she loved to sit in the evenings and watch the sunset. He expanded the cabin, adding a small addition that would eventually serve as a nursery, though they did not speak of that directly yet. One evening in late August, Katherine came to him with a mixture of nervousness and excitement on her face. "I have something to tell you," she said, taking his hands in hers. "What is it?" "I am with child. We are going to have a baby." Garrett felt his heart nearly burst with joy. He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair, overwhelmed with emotion. "Truly, truly. I am about 2 months along, I think. The baby should come in late winter or early spring." He pulled back to look at her, his hands framing her face. "How do you feel about this? I know, given your history, this might be frightening." Katherine's eyes were bright with tears, but she was smiling. "I am terrified," she admitted, "but I am also hopeful, and I think that hope is what you have given me, the ability to dream of a future again, to believe that good things can happen and maybe stay." "We are going to celebrate this," Garrett declared. "Every single day until this baby arrives, we are going to celebrate the fact that you are growing our child, that we are creating a new life together." And he kept that promise. Every morning, he told Katherine something he loved about her. Every evening, he talked to her growing belly, telling their child stories about the mountains and the wildlife and how much they were already loved. He made sure she ate well, rested often, and never lifted anything too heavy. He was protective to the point of being overbearing, but Katherine found it endearing rather than stifling. As fall arrived and the leaves turned brilliant colors, Katherine stood on the porch of their cabin, one hand on her belly, watching Garrett chop wood for winter. His muscles flexed with each swing of the axe, his long hair falling forward over his shoulders, and she marveled at how much her life had changed in just a few short months. "What are you thinking about?" Garrett called, noticing her watching him. "About how I came here because I was broken," she said. "And you helped me heal. You gave me a reason to celebrate life again. He set down the axe and walked over to her, pulling her into his arms. "You were never broken, Katherine. You were hurt, and there is a difference. You just needed someone to remind you of your strength." "I needed you," she corrected. "Specifically you." As winter settled over the mountain, bringing snow and long nights, Catherine's belly grew round and full. Garrett fussed over her constantly, making sure she stayed warm, that she had enough to eat, that she was comfortable. He made her tea from herbs he gathered and rubbed her swollen feet at the end of each day. He read to her from the few books he owned, his deep voice soothing and steady. On Christmas Day, their first as a married couple, Garrett surprised Katherine with a wooden cradle he had been secretly building for weeks. It was beautifully crafted, smooth and sturdy, with a gentle rocking motion. Katherine cried when she saw it, running her hands over the carved animals on the sides. "It is perfect," she whispered. "Everything is perfect. I am celebrating the fact that in a few months this cradle will hold our child," Garrett said, "and that I get to experience this miracle with you." "I am scared," Katherine admitted, her hand on her belly. "What if something goes wrong? What if I lose this baby like I lost Emma?" "We will face whatever comes together," Garrett promised. "But Katherine, you are healthy and strong. This baby is healthy and strong. I can feel it. Everything is going to be all right." She wanted to believe him, and mostly she did. The baby came on a cold night in February, during a brief break in the winter storms. Garrett had ridden to town a week earlier and convinced Mrs. Henley to come stay with them as the birth approached, knowing Katherine would need another woman present. Mrs. Henley had agreed, settling into the cabin with her no-nonsense efficiency and reassuring presence. When Katherine's pain started, Garrett wanted to stay with her, but Mrs. Henley shooed him out of the bedroom. "This is women's work," she said firmly. "You wait outside." So Garrett paced the main room of the cabin, his heart in his throat, listening to Katherine's cries of pain and praying harder than he ever had in his life. The night stretched endlessly, each cry from the bedroom like a knife to his heart. He wanted to burst through the door to hold her hand to help somehow, but he trusted Mrs. Henley knew what she was doing. Finally, as dawn began to break, he heard a different sound. A baby's cry, strong and healthy. He sagged against the wall in relief, tears streaming down his face. A few minutes later, Mrs. Henley opened the door, her face tired but smiling. "You have a son," she said. "A big, healthy boy, and Katherine is fine, tired but fine." Garrett rushed into the room and found Katherine propped up in bed, exhausted and pale but glowing with happiness. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. His son. Their son. "Hello, Papa," Katherine said softly, smiling at him. "Come meet your boy." Garrett approached carefully, as if sudden movement might shatter this perfect moment. He looked down at the baby, at the tiny red face and shock of dark hair, and felt his heart expand in a way he did not know was possible. This was his son. His family. "He is beautiful," Garrett whispered, touching one tiny fist with his finger. The baby gripped it reflexively, and Garrett felt tears streaming down his face again. "He is perfect. You are perfect." "What should we name him?" Katherine asked. They had discussed names during her pregnancy but never settled on one definitively. Now, looking at this new life, Garrett said, "What about Daniel, after your first husband? Our son should know that he is named for a good man." Katherine's eyes filled with tears. "Are you sure?" "I am sure. Daniel deserves to be remembered, and our son will carry his name with honor." "Daniel Grayson," Katherine said softly, testing the name. "I like it. I love it." Mrs. Henley stayed for another week, helping Katherine recover and teaching her the things she had forgotten about caring for a newborn. When she finally left, promising to visit in the spring, Katherine and Garrett were alone with their son, learning together how to be parents. It was exhausting and terrifying and absolutely wonderful. Daniel was a hungry baby, waking frequently to nurse, and Katherine was tired all the time. But Garrett stepped in whenever he could, changing Daniel's cloths, walking him when he fussed, singing to him in his deep, off-key voice. He marveled at every tiny thing their son did, every coo and yawn and stretch. "I am celebrating the fact that our son smiled at me today," Garrett announced one afternoon when Daniel was 6 weeks old. "That was probably gas," Katherine said, but she was smiling. It was a smile. He loves his papa already. As spring arrived and the snow began to melt, Katherine took Daniel outside for the first time, showing him the mountains and the sky and the endless possibilities of the world. "This is where you were born," she told him. "In this beautiful, wild place. With a father who loves celebrations and a mother who is learning how to live again." Daniel looked up at her with his dark eyes, Garrett's eyes, and Katherine felt her heart nearly burst with love. She had thought her capacity for love had died with her first family, but she had been wrong. Love was not finite. It was infinite, expanding to encompass new people, new possibilities. The years passed in a blur of joy and hard work. Daniel grew from a baby into a toddler, then a little boy, full of energy and curiosity. He loved the mountains as much as his parents did, helping Garrett with his traps, following Katherine around as she worked in her expanded garden. He was a happy child, confident in his parents' love, growing up in a home filled with celebration and laughter. When Daniel was 3, Katherine gave birth to a daughter. They named her Emma, and Katherine cried happy tears when Garrett suggested it. "Both of our children named for people we loved and lost," he said. "Our way of honoring the past while celebrating the future." Emma was a calm baby, easier than Daniel had been, with her mother's blonde hair and her father's dark eyes. Daniel was fascinated by his sister, always wanting to help care for her, to show her things, to make her smile. Garrett continued his tradition of finding reasons to celebrate, now including his children in the practice. He celebrated first words and first steps. He celebrated Daniel's first successful fishing trip and Emma's first laugh. He made sure both children knew that every day held something worth honoring, some reason to be grateful. Katherine thrived in her new life. The woman who had once refused to celebrate anything now made sure every birthday was marked with cake and songs. She made holidays special with decorations and special meals. She found joy in the everyday moments, in watching her children play, in working alongside her husband, in the life they had built together on their mountain. "I never thought I could be this happy," she told Garrett one evening as they sat on the porch, watching their children chase fireflies in the twilight. "I never thought I deserved to be." "You deserve every bit of happiness," Garrett said, pulling her close, "and more. You always did." "Thank you," Katherine said softly, "for not giving up on me, for seeing something in me worth saving." "I did not save you," Garrett corrected. "You saved yourself. I just gave you a safe place to do it." When Daniel was 7 and Emma was 4, they made their first trip as a family to Golden. The children were excited to see the town, to meet people other than the occasional trapper or trader who passed by their mountain. Katherine was nervous, worried that seeing children celebrating birthdays or holidays would bring back painful memories. But Garrett held her hand the whole time, anchoring her. Mrs. Henley was delighted to see them all, exclaiming over how much the children had grown. She insisted they stay for dinner, and as they sat around her table, Katherine realized something. She was happy. Genuinely, completely happy. The pain of her past was still there, a permanent scar on her heart, but it no longer defined her. It was part of her story, but not the whole story. That night, after the children were asleep in the room Mrs. Henley had prepared, Katherine and Garrett lay together in bed, and she turned to him with tears in her eyes. "What is wrong?" he asked, immediately concerned. "Nothing is wrong," she assured him. "Everything is right. That is what is making me cry. I am so happy, Garrett, so grateful for this life, for you, for our children. And I am not afraid of that happiness anymore. I am not waiting for it to be taken away. I am just living in it, celebrating it, the way you taught me." "You taught yourself," Garrett said, kissing her softly. "I just pointed you in the right direction." As the years continued to pass, Daniel and Emma grew into young adults. Daniel inherited his father's love of the mountains and his mother's practical nature. Emma was more bookish, always reading, always asking questions about the world beyond their mountain. They were both confident and kind, raised in a home where every day was treated as a gift, where small joys were celebrated with as much enthusiasm as major milestones. When Daniel turned 18, he announced that he wanted to follow in his father's footsteps, learning the trapping trade and eventually building his own cabin nearby. Garrett was proud beyond words, while Katherine tried not to cry at the thought of her son growing up and moving out, even if he would only be a few miles away. Emma, at 15, declared that she wanted to be a teacher, perhaps in Golden or even a larger town. She loved children and loved learning, and Katherine and Garrett both supported her dreams, even though it meant she would eventually leave their mountain home. "We raised them to be independent," Garrett reminded Katherine when she worried about their children leaving. "To be strong and capable and ready to face the world, that was always the plan." "I know," Katherine said. "It is just hard to let go." "We are not letting go. We are letting them fly. There is a difference." On Katherine's 50th birthday, Garrett threw her a surprise party. He had been planning it for months, secretly inviting people from Golden, arranging for food and decorations, building a platform in the clearing where musicians could play. Katherine had no idea until she stepped out of the cabin that morning and found dozens of people gathered, including Mrs. Henley, now elderly but still sharp as a tack, and friends they had made over the years. "Surprise!" Everyone shouted, and Katherine burst into tears, overwhelmed with joy. "I cannot believe you did this," she said to Garrett, laughing and crying at the same time. "We are celebrating you," he said simply. "Everything you are, everything you have become, the woman who learned to celebrate life again." The party lasted all day, with music and dancing and laughter. Daniel, now 23 and newly married himself, gave a toast to his mother. "She taught us that every day is worth celebrating," he said. "That joy is a choice, and that love is worth the risk. We are all better people because of her example." Emma, now 20, gave a toast as well. "Mama taught us to see the beauty in small moments, to appreciate what we have while we have it, and to never take for granted the people who love us. I hope to be half the woman she is." Katherine cried through both toasts, holding Garrett's hand tightly. When she finally stood to say something herself, her voice was thick with emotion. 33 years ago, I stood in a town not far from here, watching other people celebrate, convinced that celebrations were not for me, that I did not deserve joy or happiness or love. And then I met a mountain man who refused to accept that, who found reasons every single day to make me feel special, to show me that life was worth living, that hope was worth having. She turned to Garrett, tears streaming down her face. "You saved my life in every way a person can be saved. You gave me back to myself. And I want everyone here to know that this man, this wonderful, stubborn, impossible man, is the reason I am standing here today, the reason I can celebrate anything at all." The crowd applauded, and Garrett pulled Katherine into his arms, kissing her in front of everyone. "I love you," he whispered, "today, tomorrow, and every day after. "I love you too," Katherine whispered back. "Thank you for teaching me to celebrate." That night, after everyone had left and the clearing was quiet again, Katherine and Garrett sat on their porch, rocking in the chairs he had built so many years ago. They were older now, their hair gray, their bodies not as strong as they once were, but their love was as solid as ever. "Do you remember the first time I brought you here?" Garrett asked, taking her hand. "I remember thinking you were crazy," Katherine said with a laugh. "Lying about a broken arm just to get me to come work for you. Best lie I ever told. Best decision I ever made, agreeing to come." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars come out one by one. Then Katherine spoke again, her voice soft with wonder. "I never thought I would have this. A family, a home, a life filled with love and celebration. I thought that chapter was closed for me." "It was not closed," Garrett said. "It was just waiting for the right moment to begin again. And you were that moment. We were that moment, together." Katherine leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady strength of him, the warmth and security he had always provided. "If I could go back and tell that broken woman in Golden what was waiting for her, I do not think she would believe me. But I would tell her anyway. I would tell her that life is full of second chances. That hope is not a weakness but a strength. That love is always worth the risk." "What else would you tell her?" Garrett asked. "That every single day is worth celebrating. Every sunrise, every sunset, every moment we get to spend with the people we love. That joy is a choice we make over and over again. And that the best way to honor those we have lost is to live fully, to love deeply, and to never, ever take a single day for granted." Garrett kissed the top of her head. "You are wise, Mrs. Grayson." "I had a good teacher, Mr. Grayson." As the years continued, Katherine and Garrett became grandparents multiple times over. Daniel and his wife had 3 children who loved visiting their grandparents' mountain cabin. Emma married a schoolteacher and had 2 children of her own, bringing them to visit as often as she could. The cabin that had once housed just Garrett, then Garrett and Katherine, was now filled regularly with the sounds of children's laughter and family gatherings. Garrett, even in his later years, continued his tradition of celebration. He found reasons to mark every visit, every milestone, every ordinary day that was made extraordinary by the presence of loved ones. And Katherine, who had spent 11 years refusing to celebrate anything, now celebrated everything, teaching her grandchildren the same lessons Garrett had taught her. "Why do you celebrate so much, Grandma?" one of Daniel's daughters asked her once. Katherine thought carefully before answering. "Because, sweetheart, life is precious and short, and we never know how much time we have. So we celebrate the good things while we can. We make every moment count. And we make sure the people we love know how special they are." "Did you always celebrate everything?" "No," Katherine admitted. "For a long time I forgot how, but your grandfather reminded me. He showed me that every day holds something worth honoring if we just look for it." "Grandpa is smart," the little girl said seriously. "Yes," Katherine agreed, watching Garrett play with his grandchildren in the clearing, still strong even in his 60s, his hair now completely white but his spirit as young as ever. "Yes, he is very smart." When Garrett turned 70, Katherine organized a celebration for him, inviting everyone they knew. It was her turn to surprise him, to show him how much he meant to not just her but to everyone whose lives he had touched. People came from all over, sharing stories of Garrett's kindness, his generosity, his unwavering goodness. "I am not sure I deserve all this," Garrett said to Katherine that evening, overwhelmed by the outpouring of love. "You deserve all of this and more," Katherine said firmly. "You have spent your entire life making other people feel special. It is time you felt special too." "I have always felt special," Garrett said, pulling her close. From the moment you agreed to come to this mountain with me, I have felt like the luckiest man alive." They danced that night, just as they had so many years ago in the firelight of their cabin. They moved slower now, their bodies not as nimble, but their connection was as strong as ever. Around them, their children and grandchildren danced too, celebrating life and love and family. Katherine looked around at all the people gathered, at the life she and Garrett had built together, and felt a peace so profound it brought tears to her eyes. She had been so broken when she met him, so convinced that happiness was not meant for her. But he had patiently, persistently, lovingly shown her that she was wrong, that life could be good, that love could last, that every single day was worth celebrating. "Thank you," she whispered to Garrett as they swayed together, "for everything, for seeing me when I felt invisible, for loving me when I thought I was unlovable, for teaching me to celebrate life again. Thank you for taking a chance on a crazy mountain man with a fake broken arm," Garrett replied with a grin, "for giving me a family and a purpose and a reason to come down from my mountain." "I love you more than I ever thought it was possible to love someone," Katherine said. "You are my home, Garrett Grayson. You always have been." "And you are mine," Garrett said, "today and always." As they grew older still, their pace slowed, but their commitment to celebrating never wavered. Even when Garrett's knees began to bother him, making climbing the mountain difficult, he still found ways to mark special moments. Even when Katherine's hands became stiff with arthritis, making cooking harder, she still insisted on baking cakes for birthdays and holidays. On their 40th wedding anniversary, surrounded by children and grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren, they renewed their vows in the same small church in Golden where they had been married. Katherine wore a new dress made by Emma, and Garrett wore a suit that Daniel had helped him pick out. They spoke their vows with tears streaming down their faces, promising again to love and honor each other for all their remaining days. "I would choose you again," Garrett said. "In every lifetime, in every circumstance, I would choose you." "And I would choose to take that chance again," Katherine said. "To leave town with a stranger and find a whole new life, because that choice led me to you and you led me back to myself." That night, lying in their bed in the cabin they had shared for 4 decades, Katherine traced the lines on Garrett's face, memorizing every detail. "We have had a good life," she said softly. "The best life," Garrett agreed. "Better than I ever imagined possible. Do you have any regrets?" "Not a single one. You?" "Only that I wasted so many years before I met you," Katherine said. "Years I could have been celebrating instead of hiding." "Those years made you who you are," Garrett said. "And I love who you are. Every part of your story, even the painful parts, they all led you here. To me, to us. You always know the right thing to say. I've had a lot of practice." They fell asleep holding hands, just as they did every night, just as they had done for 40 years. And in the morning, Garrett woke Katherine with coffee and a single wildflower, just as he had done countless times before. "What are we celebrating today?" Katherine asked, smiling at him over the rim of her cup. "I am celebrating the fact that I get another day with you," Garrett said simply. "Another day to love you, to see your smile, to hear your voice. That is more than enough reason for celebration." And so it went, day after day, year after year, 2 people who had found each other against all odds and had built a life worth celebrating. They grew old together on their mountain, surrounded by love and family and the wild beauty of Colorado. And every single day, they found reasons to celebrate, to appreciate, to give thanks for the gift of each other. When Garrett passed away at the age of 78, peacefully in his sleep with Katherine beside him, she held his hand and whispered all the things she wanted him to know. That he had been her salvation, her greatest love, her truest friend. That he had taught her how to live again, how to hope again, how to celebrate again. That every single day with him had been a gift she would treasure forever. At his funeral, Katherine stood and spoke about the man who had changed her life. "He was a mountain man," she said, her voice steady despite her grief. "Strong and protective and full of quiet wisdom. But more than that, he was a man who understood that life is made up of moments, and that every moment is worth honoring. He taught me that celebration is not about grand gestures or big events. It is about noticing the small things, the everyday miracles, and giving them the attention they deserve." She paused, tears streaming down her face, but her voice remained strong. "Garrett found reasons every single day to make me feel special. And in doing so, he made every single day special. He gave me back my life, my hope, my ability to love. And I will spend the rest of my days celebrating his memory and the incredible gift he gave me." After the funeral, Katherine returned to the mountain alone for the first time in 4 decades. The cabin felt empty without Garrett's presence, too quiet without his voice. But she forced herself to continue his tradition. Every morning she found a reason to celebrate: the sunrise, the birds singing, the memories of all their years together. Her children worried about her being alone on the mountain, but Katherine insisted she was fine. "This is where I found myself," she told them. "This is where I learned to live again. I am not leaving." Daniel moved his family closer, into a cabin just down the mountain, so he could check on his mother daily. Emma visited as often as she could, bringing her children and grandchildren. And Katherine found that while she missed Garrett with an ache that never fully went away, she could still find joy, still find reasons to celebrate. She lived for another 12 years after Garrett's death, staying on the mountain she loved, surrounded by family and memories. She taught her grandchildren and great-grandchildren about the importance of celebration, of gratitude, of noticing the small wonders that made life worth living. And she told them stories about their grandfather, the mountain man who had saved a broken woman and taught her how to hope again. When Katherine passed away at the age of 87, also peacefully in her sleep in the cabin she had shared with Garrett for so many years, her family gathered to celebrate her life. They did not mourn, as she had requested. Instead, they celebrated. They shared stories and laughter and tears of joy. They honored her memory by doing exactly what she had taught them to do, by finding reasons to be grateful even in their grief. "She was the girl who never celebrated anything," Daniel said in his eulogy, his voice thick with emotion. "But she became the woman who celebrated everything, and she taught all of us to do the same, to see the beauty in ordinary moments, to appreciate the people we love while we have them, to never take a single day for granted." Emma added, "Mama and Papa gave us the greatest gift parents can give. They showed us what real love looks like, patient, kind, enduring, and full of celebration. They found each other when they were both lost, and together they built something beautiful. A life, a family, a legacy of love that will continue through all of us." Katherine was buried next to Garrett in a small cemetery in Golden, under a tree that overlooked the mountains they had both loved. On her headstone, her children had inscribed the words, "She learned to celebrate life, and in doing so, she taught us all how to truly live." And in the years that followed, their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren continued the tradition that Garrett had started so many decades ago. They found reasons to celebrate every single day. They made sure the people they loved felt special and valued. They approached life with gratitude and wonder, seeing each day as a gift to be honored. The cabin on the mountain was maintained by the family, passed down through generations, a place where anyone who needed peace or healing, or a reminder of what was truly important could go. And there, in that wild, beautiful place where a mountain man had once brought a broken woman to heal, The legacy of celebration continued, touching life after life, reminding everyone who visited that every single day, every single moment, is worth honoring if we just take the time to notice.